Hey, lipids. You should get a lipids notes paper from the sub. You guys know what to do with it by now. The energy drink case study, if you have any questions about that still, if you can send me a message in Schoology and I'll answer you that way. And remember that tomorrow we have a reading quiz on proteins. So, lipids. What's a lipid? They don't really have a molecule in common like carbohydrates do. There's usually no monomer. So the reason that they're all together is because none of them like water. They're all hydrophobic, or they're mostly hydrophobic. Some of them, only part of them is hydrophobic, but still it counts. They are mostly hydrocarbons. Excuse me. Hydrocarbons were hydrogen and carbon only. They didn't like water. Lipids don't like water. So there's fats, phospholipids, and steroids. We're going to look at each one. A fat. It's a lipid made from a glycerol molecule and one or more fatty acid molecules. So I have a more specific picture coming up. This, even though it's made of multiple things, it's not technically a polymer. So polymer means that it has to be built from smaller monomer pieces, kind of like how carbohydrates were. They all had like those smaller molecules that built together. Fats aren't really like that. They're kind of two different molecules, so they're not a polymer technically, but they're still a pretty big molecule. Glycerol. It is an alcohol, if you remember your functional groups, OHs, with 3 carbons in the carbon chain. And fatty acids have long carbon skeletons, like 16, 18 carbons, with a carboxyl group at one of the ends. I have a more specific picture coming up here. So there's the glycerol on the very left side. You see the OH, it's an alcohol, 3 carbons. These fatty acid tails, there's your carboxyl with the double bond O. They do some dehydration synthesis, and now it is what we call a triglyceride because it has 3 fatty acids attached to it. Different kinds of fats, they vary in how long they are, how many carbons they have, how many double bonds they have, and where the double bonds are. But in general, we've got saturated fats that have no double bonds. So the molecule is, quote, saturated with hydrogen. I'm going to flip to a picture. This one on top here, every single place where a hydrogen can be, there's a hydrogen. So that is a saturated fat. Whereas an unsaturated fat has 1 or more double bonds. So since saturated fat has long, straight molecules with all those hydrogens, it's very stiff. And the molecules can kind of pack on top of each other, and that makes it solid at room temperature. So something like butter is a saturated fat. An unsaturated fat, because it has those double bonds in it, it gets bent, so it can't pack on top of itself, and it's liquid at room temperature. So something that you would see as a solid fat, like your butter or bacon fat, that would be a saturated fat. Something that would be more liquid at room temperature, that's an unsaturated fat, like oils. If you see on food labels it says something has been hydrogenated, that basically means they took an unsaturated fat and forced hydrogen into it to make it a saturated fat. Something like margarine is like that. Next one, phospholipids. They are similar to fats, but they only have 2 fatty acids. And in the place of that third one is a phosphate group. Remember your functional groups. And because of that phosphate group, that means that phospholipids are both polar and nonpolar. That means they're both hydrophilic and hydrophobic. They are both. Most molecules have to choose. They're either water-loving or water-hating. They don't get to be both, but phospholipids are both. So the circle part there, the head, quote unquote, part, is the hydrophilic part. The tails, or the fatty acid chains, don't like water, they're hydrophobic. They're important in cell membranes. We're going to see them in the last unit when we talk about cells. So you can see in a cell membrane, that blue picture, all the head areas point outward and all the tail areas point inward. And that gives the cell membrane all of its important properties, since phospholipids both like water and don't like water. There's a technical picture of it. So there's the phosphate. And there's your glycerol, same thing as before. And there's the 2 fatty acid chains. Same thing as before, just now we stuck on the phosphate. Last one, steroids. Yes, those steroids. A steroid is a chemical name for a molecule that sends messages. So hormones are included in that, but it's steroids. They are lipids, but unlike the other ones where they have long chains, these ones have rings. Like in that picture type rings. And remember, everywhere you see where 2 lines come together at intersection, that would be a carbon. They just don't draw them all. So there are different steroids depending on which functional groups get stuck on the ring. An example one is cholesterol. Yes, that cholesterol, the one that your grandparents are probably worried about. Cholesterol is naturally found in your cell membranes, and it's the base for all of the hormones. I have a picture coming up. But having too much of it is also not a good thing. The same reason having too much fat's not a good thing. So you take cholesterol and add on different functional groups, and you'll make all of the hormones. So, for example, these. You see, the base is all pretty much the same. It has the same rings. Those same 4 rings over and over again. They just add on different functional groups. So on the bottom left and the middle on the bottom, those are 2 female hormones, progesterone and estradiol. On the right on the bottom and the one above it, those are 2 male hormones, testosterone and aldosterone. Cortisol is the one that's found in the blood that your grandparents might be worried about. So they're all based on the same thing. They're all still a lipid. They don't like water. And they're different because they have different functional groups stuck to them. So that is it for lipids. I will be back tomorrow. Reading quiz is still happening tomorrow. Remember to get your case study done and turned in. And if you still have extra time, you can use it to work on other stuff. Have a good day.